Well, welcome back to another episode of Let's Chat with Julie Lewin. And today I have a very special guest, Miroslav Petrovic. I feel very honored to have you on our podcast, Miroslav. And before we get started, I'm just going to share a little bit about you. You are a TEDx speaker, a facilitator, and best-selling author who has worked with over 5,000 people across the world, supporting them to bring their message to the world. That's awesome. I'm so pleased to hear that. You are the founder of the Enliven Speaking Institute, which is where you teach speakers to deliver their message with authenticity, to connect with their audience. And, you know, we need that. We need that in the world. You also have written an academic thesis on the use of embodied presence for engagement with Monash University. I want to talk about that. And which you later utilized to write your best-selling book, Them Goosebumps. And if anyone here listening knows me, I'm the Goosebumps queen. I love Goosebumps. So I love the title of your book. And your message and off the beaten path approach speaks to thought leaders, coaches, entrepreneurs who want to embrace a deeper, more conscious way of communicating and leading through mind, body, and spirit. You are my kind of person. This is all what I love to talk about. And you're fascinated by how we can be more fully alive with everything we do and believe that being in connection with our own personal presence is the most important dynamic relationship we have in life. Absolutely. And that is the power of presence. Wow, Miroslav, I am so excited for this chat today. I can't even tell you. So why don't you share just a little bit more about yourself and let's get into a juicy conversation.
I love it already. I love your excitement with the goosebumps and, the brief conversations we've already had.
Yeah.
Really good.
Yeah.
About myself overall, so what I can say is I came to Australia as a refugee. I used to stutter a lot. I was like 5 years old at the time. Some people just assumed I was mute because of how little I spoke. And I was just speaking to another woman before this who was also an immigrant from overseas. And both of us, also a very shy immigrant, and both of us have ended up, becoming speaker trainers.
Mm-hmm.
There's this funny thing that I think happens when we follow that spiritual soul calling. Yeah. It's like, if you want that path, you don't get to choose how it looks like. And often it forces us to face the things that we've been running away from.
Exactly. Yes, exactly. And I just put my arm up. You may not have seen that, but I have goosebumps already, which
we're off to a good start.
It's a wonderful start. So I don't even know where to start, Miroslav, but I really want to talk about the inner work because I have this strong belief that the inner work, what we do within our being, that no one else in the world actually gets to see, witness, experience, that what we do in that part of ourselves actually informs our outer world, what happens in our outer world. And that's what I'm so curious about. When I say that to you, what does that bring up in your mind?
It's like, often when I work with people, they think that their problems are outside of them, and I'm often just bringing it back to the internal state. And it's like, when you shift the internal state, the way we respond and relate to reality around us changes 100%. Everything.
It does. Yeah.
One of my spiritual teachers used to say, there is like the seer, the seen, and the seeing are one. Like, these are all just language where we separate ourselves between reality. And when a change happens internally, it filters through the whole pattern, so to speak.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm just going to share this because it's something that just dropped in as you were saying that. When I'm doing something in my business, because I strongly believe that how I am internally impacts my business, not just my personal world, it impacts my business. And one of the things that I've noticed over the years is if let's say I've done a launch of something where I've got a whole bunch of clients coming in, it's a big chunk of money. And then instead of thinking about how I'm serving those people and what they're going to get out of what I do with them, I then start thinking what I can do with that money for myself and my life and my future. Something dynamically changes and it just doesn't keep flowing. The people might pull out, or it kind of implodes over here. And so I'm really conscious of when I'm working with my business that I keep my inner world focused on my service and what I'm going to help my clients achieve, rather than what them working with me is going to get for me. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does.
Yeah. And so have you found that with yourself or with your clients, that level of awareness impacts what happens in the outer world?
I think it depends how much emotional weight there is on it. I don't think that there's any problem with like having the capacity to redistribute how wealth or money is going to move through one business to another. But I definitely find when there's an emotional weight attached to it, whatever that emotional weight is, that's when it's likely not as useful. Whereas when it's just clear inside of us, and I think especially when you look at some like very affluent, millionaires, it's like there's not a sense of attachment or scarcity on it or anything on the money. They're just looking at how it's going to move through them and what they're going to create with what's moving. So it's like it lives in a very different place inside their world. I think that whole thing is a pathway. I know when I first started, there was a lot of scarcity, and the thought of a client pulling out was really scary. And then after some time, it's like I've come to see if I spend my energy and focus on the client that's being iffy, what's all the other people that are waiting for me to work with them that aren't even going to hear my voice because I'm self-consumed with this thing that's happening over here.
I really like that. I really like that. And another way that I look at it is that I'm being protected energetically. If somebody is iffy or doesn't fully commit, then I would rather not work with that person than have them not be happy with what's happening. I'd much rather not work with somebody. And that's why I always have a chat with someone before I work with them, because I can feel in their energy whether they're committed to themselves. It's not about being committed to me. It's about the commitment to themselves.
Completely.
Yeah.
I think the client brings half the transformation with them.
They do. The biggest step is to make a commitment, make a decision and make a commitment to themselves, not to me or you or any other person that helps them. Yeah. So talk to me about what your spiritual process is in your day-to-day world. Like, what do you do that keeps you connected or plugged into, I call it the divine stream. I don't know what you call it.
I think I call it being centered inside myself.
Yeah.
We're pointing at the same thing.
Yeah.
My root practice at the moment has been 24 minutes of meditation a day. And I've been like, there's been some nights where it's like 11 p.m. I'm already in bed I'm about to fall asleep, and I'll be like, oh shit, I forgot to meditate today because I was flying or whatever. And I'll get myself back out of bed to make sure I sit those 24 minutes.
Is
That's
there a reason why it's 24 minutes? Like, is that a cycle? Why do you do 24 minutes?
in the tantric system, traditionally they would say meditate for one gatika, and a gatika is what we would equate to as 24 minutes today. I find psychologically as well, it's easy to commit to 24 minutes. It's not even half an hour, you know. It's how much time I'd spend scrolling on my phone or something, and it feels a lot more productive and gets me back in touch with myself. Now, what I do is I set my timer for 24 minutes, and I do a minimum of 24 minutes. And sometimes that turns into 40 minutes. Sometimes it turns into 2 hours. It's like, if it's pleasurable, I'm just going to keep sitting. Sometimes, even if it's uncomfortable, I'm going to keep sitting because I'm like, oh, this is where I need to be right now.
Yeah.
Just having 24 minutes is an easy boundary. Like in the past, when I've tried to do, an hour every day, it's very easy for the mind to talk itself out of sitting for an hour.
I agree. Yeah. When I first started meditating, I used to commit to 15 minutes. And I'd look at my watch and I'd go, right, okay, that's when the 15 minutes is up, and then I'd sit, and then I would feel my energy coming back into my body, and I'd go, no. And then I'd look at my watch, and it was exactly when I said I would come back. And so once I got used to that 15 minutes, I really did want to do longer. And so if we start off with small amounts, that's more doable than saying we're going to meditate for an hour. And I don't know about you, but I found I started meditating when I was 26. I had a newborn and a 2-year-old, and I was struggling, like being a mum. It was hard. And I had a part-time job, and the lady I was working with, she said, I know why you've come into my life. She said, have you ever meditated? And I said, no. And to me, like, this is back in the 80s, to me, it was people who meditated, they took drugs, they wore weird clothes, they had smelly stuff that I didn't want to be part of. They played weird instruments. And I have to be honest, I was scared of that. And so anyway, she said, I think you should come with me. And I went, oh, okay. So when I got there, it was all of those things that I thought, not about the drugs, I didn't know about that, but they had a sitar, the Indian instrument, they had a harmonium, they had so much incense burning that you couldn't see clearly in the room. And she just pushed me in like a little chick, and she said, sit on that cushion there. So I did, and I followed along. I connected. And then when it finished, she said, well, what happened? And I said, I can't actually remember what I said, but she went, oh, you experienced that? And I said, well, yes. Doesn't everyone? She said, well, no, especially not on the first time. And she said, well, are you coming back? I said, no. She said, why not? I said, oh no, this is too weird for me. And she said, all right, well, you can meditate at home. You just decide what time of the day. You sit on the same cushion in the same spot at the same time, and you meditate for 15 minutes. And so I did. And my husband would come home at 4 o'clock. I would meditate at 3 o'clock when the kids were asleep. And he could tell as soon as he opened the door whether I had meditated. He could feel it in the energy. And if I hadn't, he'd say, right, I'm going to take the kids for a walk and you meditate, because I was so much calmer. My energy was so, I'm going to say benign, as in it was gentle, Whereas if I haven't meditated, my energy's not as gentle. So it was really quite palpable. And it was meditation that got me through being a new mum.
Mm,
It
yeah.
was, it settled my nervous system and calmed the energy. So, yeah.
I think like my background is in studying education, and I've always said there's two things I wish I was taught at school. One of them, and the first one is easily meditation. I think everyone's life would be so different if that was just a skill that we grew up with. And I like what you're saying here. It's like there's meditation in a cultural context, which has the incense and might have deities or, different cultural elements. And there's also just meditation, which is devoid of anything weird or spiritually. It's actually just coming back into the presence of life, which enriches everyone's life.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And the second thing for me, it's like people think these two are polar opposites, but the first one would be meditation. The second thing I wish I learned in school was sales.
Absolutely.
I think just having the capacity to do sales as a conversation, as a skill set, just like walking, completely changes the way we interact with the world around us. How we get sold to, how we engage with those conversations, and also being able to have value building conversations with people that we might be a match to work with. Like a lot of this just gets missed and gets dodgy and pushy and uncomfortable because we haven't been brought up in
haven't been educated.
Really understands. Yeah, exactly. And I feel like the process could just be easier.
It would be good if it was our first language.
Yeah.
That it was autonomic and authentic, and that we didn't have to think about it. We didn't get sweaty palms and we didn't get anxious and all of those things that come with doing something that we're uncomfortable with. So what do you say to people that helps them be their genuine self, their authentic self when doing sales? Like how do you approach that?
What I offer to people I work with, and this isn't all of them, we're all in different situations, we're all walking different paths. But for me, at some point, I realized that the business and sales was my spiritual path. Like if I sit in an ashram, I'm hiding from life. Sure, it looks like the thing, and to everyone else, they might be like, good gold star for you, Miroslav, you've been meditating 10 hours a day. I'm like, that's not where the growth is. The growth is in putting myself out there and burning through my own judgments about what I used to think about people like that, and also opening myself to be judged by others, because that's just like, that's where life inside me wants to go. And sometimes what I say to people is just to look at it in that way, like learning to position or sell your services and offerings is just another ritual. It's just another ceremony that your consciousness is going through to let go of stuff that doesn't fit anymore. Like pretending to be spiritual is just another identity. And truly going to play this game of not being attached to our identity, we don't really get a choice. Like you do get a choice, sure, you can always redirect it and say no and do what you want to. But the deepest desires inside of us, where they're coming from, is probably related to whether you want to call it the divine, whether you want to call it karma, the path that we're walking. We don't get to choose those things. We get to acknowledge them and embrace them and relate to them. But our desires, someone aren't even of our own choosing. We notice them and they show up and they say, I desire this. But at what point would I choose for that to be the desire that's there?
Exactly.
That's a question.
I know. And, as you were saying that, like with the work that I've been doing, it'll be 40 years in October that I started on this path. And a clairvoyant said to me, you have a gift of X-ray vision. You can see inside of people's bodies. If you choose that path, you'll have an amazing life and be of great benefit. But he didn't tell me how I would do that. I didn't know how I would do that. But the thing that I recognized was the truth of what he was saying, in that if I didn't choose that destiny, I knew the truth of the other one that he shared with me. And how I identify with that this is my path, like this is my destiny, this is my passion, this is my desire, is even if I decide, no, that's not it, I don't want to do that, and I turn my back on that and I try and do something over here, I always keep coming back. It somehow draws me back. There's this invisible force that draws me back to the work that I now call Arakira. And it has a powerful pull. And that's how I know, do I always like that this is the direction? No, I think that there would be different things that I could do, but it pulls me, it pulls at my soul, and it kind of has this I don't know, energy that is indefinable but unbreakable, if that makes sense. And I have to just keep doing it. And so that's where I'm going with the desire. And the desire is not that I heal people, but I help people understand how to heal themselves, be empowered to do the work themselves. And that's what drives me, I think.
It's nice.
So what drives you?
Enlightenment.
Yeah.
There's a real deep desire to know the truth. And as you were saying this, it kind of reminds me of, I don't know if you're familiar with Jed McKenna. He's a bit of like a bad boy in spirituality. No one actually knows who Jed McKenna is. It's a pen name.
Okay.
It writes a lot about enlightenment in alternative perspectives. And one of the things he talks about is how enlightenment has no real purpose. It doesn't make your life better. If anything, it's really uncomfortable for the ego. It's a lot of letting go, a lot of suffering. Your ego is not going to like it. And like, as someone who's gone through the whole path and established himself in that space, he goes, there's really no good reason to do this unless you can't help it.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's a similar piece. It's like, there's times where I was like, I'd be happy as a farmer and I'd try farming and I'm like, I can't sleep at night. Without this part, without my deeper desires being expressed, I'm never going to be happy. And there was just an acceptance of like, I have to walk this path of service, and that is what's going to give me all the things I really do want in life.
Yeah. And the things for me that I want, I remember we went to Taiwan in 1994 before it was January 1994. We went to Taiwan and I was taken by our host family to a temple every day, because when I started doing the Arakira work, I would go into like a great hall space and there would be this being that I called the Golden One. And he was like a Buddha, golden Buddha. And so when our host family found out that that's what I was doing, they invited us all as a family to go to Taiwan, and they took me to every temple to see if I could find the Golden One in one of the temples. And it was quite an extraordinary trip. And we went to the International Buddha Light Association temple in Kaohsiung. And it was right up the top of this hill. I won't call it a mountain. The cars parked down the bottom and you had to walk up. It was kind of like that. It was steep. And then there was this big ornate gate that it was a working temple with a lot of monks, and you got to have lunch in where the monks ate their lunch. And we got a tour all around the temple. But before you went in, there was a life-size statue of Kuan Yin, goddess Kuan Yin, and she had her hand like this. And everyone threw a specific Taiwanese coin And if they landed the coin in her hand, then she would grant you your wish. And so there was about 15 of us, and it was my turn, so I threw the coin and it landed in her hand. I was the only one that it landed in her hand, and I went, oh gosh, what do I wish for? So I wished for peace, health, happiness, and harmony. And then I thought, I wonder if I can do it again. So I threw the coin again and it landed in her hand. And I didn't want to be greedy, so I asked for it again: peace, health, happiness, and harmony. And then we came home and I was telling someone about this. And as I got to that part of the story, it was like a floodlight shone on the wall in the lounge room, but it was at midday and the sun was directly above. And I went, oh, did you see that? That means I'll have peace, health, happiness, and harmony. And I was really excited about it. And then I went to Ireland to work with an AIDS patient, and he was in hospital in Belfast, in the centre of the ward, and it was like a Florence Nightingale ward where there was like maybe 36 beds on the whole ward, and he was in the middle, and we had curtains around to separate each bed from each other. And I was sitting there talking, and suddenly it was like this floodlight lit the wall behind him. And I looked and I paused, and then I kept speaking. He said, did you see that? And I said, did you see that? And he said, yes. He said, do you know what it means? I'd only met this person, so I didn't want to sort of share that story. And I said, oh, no, not really. He said, well, I'll tell you what it means. It means that you will have peace, health, happiness, and harmony. I said, how did you even know that? He said, you would be surprised what I know. And I thought, wow. And I have to be honest and say that that is the definition of what I've been able to build in the last 30 years. I feel like I live my life in peace, health, happiness, and harmony. So we can create a world that we want to live in. Would you agree?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. So that's my little story there of connecting in and feeling very blessed. Yeah.
I think there's definitely these moments along the journey that remind us what direction we're going in. I recall one of my, I'm not even sure who I heard this story from, but they were saying, someone in their life was saying, how come all these amazing things, all these people in my life have these amazing spiritual experiences?
Yeah.
And I don't have any of them. And I think this person was just a child. And they turned to what could have been, I don't know, their friend or their mother or something, and they said, because you're so evolved that you don't need them. And I just love that as well. It's like, when we need the signs to remind us that we're going the right direction, they're there. And when that resolve and connection is so strong inside us, it's like the signs don't have to be as loud.
I love that, Miroslav.
And the fact that
I love that
he
so
said this as a
much.
child as well, just like that inner innocence and wisdom that comes through.
Absolutely. That is so amazing. I'm going to remember that and share it if it is appropriate when somebody asks me that question, because people do ask that question often. Yeah. Why don't I get to have those experiences? And that doing the work that I do, I often like to reflect back to people what they say, because often people speak and they don't hear what they say. Have you found that?
Yeah, sometimes it runs on automatic, the things we say.
Yeah.
And I think it happens to me as well. Like, I've been with my wife for probably just under 4 years now. and the things she's reflected back to me, I'm like, oh, no one else has noticed this about me, And
Yeah.
sometimes I don't even notice it. It's just like it's happening in the background.
Yeah.
And it's like, especially because the way she does it is often to laugh at me, and sometimes like tease me in a mocking, playful way where I can't help but laugh at myself. It's like, oh yeah, I'm doing that thing again.
Yeah.
It's endearing.
Yeah. Yeah. And so you came to Australia as a child, a shy child. Would you still say that you're shy now?
I'd say definitely have the capacity for shyness.
Yeah.
I think it's more of a spectrum now. When I have to take up space and lead, I'm very comfortable going there.
Mm-hmm.
And there's also times where I'm very comfortable just, not doing that and being
Yeah.
inside my shell.
Yeah.
And I'd say there's probably less judgment and more range in how I can express myself. It's
Yeah.
like I will answer life's call in the way it shows up without making it too personal about myself
Yeah.
as much
How
as
do you
possible.
do that? Like, I'm sure people will want to know, how do you answer life's call without making it too personal about yourself?
I think there's two sides to it. One of them is our relationship to fear. And um, I did a whole TED talk on this and I wrote about this in the book as well, but I'm going to try and condense this concept into as few words as possible for the
Yeah.
purpose of this. I would say many of us have a misaligned relationship to fear, and we think it's fear, whereas perhaps it's God's call asking us to take a step forward. And instead of answering that call, we fill it with all the stories of why we shouldn't do it, why we're not good enough, blah, 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 all the things that go in there. This is the very abridged version. What I found when I started answering those calls to meet the fear was it became an intensely liberating experience. It's not like white light and cuddles, it's intensely liberating. It's like being pumped by millions and gazillions volts of fear and recognizing like, whoa, this can't hurt me. I can survive all of this. Not only can I survive it, I feel more like myself when I step through this. And the person that couldn't survive it was not even me. That's someone I've been pretending to be for a long time. It's like the unveiling of a shell of our personality and identity is the threshold of going through fear. So I think getting that on a deeply somatic level in my body just opened up my capacity. Like my early days speaking, unless I was feeling the fear, I was like, do I even need to be on this stage?
Wow.
It really became the calling card. And that's often what I say to my students as well now. It's like, sometimes people say before they want to work with me, they say, can you teach me to not be afraid? Or will we get rid of the fear? And I laugh and I say, kind of. You're not going to get rid of it. Your relationship to it is going to change.
Will change. Yeah.
You get comfortable like eating fear for breakfast as a part of a 3-course meal or something,
Yeah.
and actually enjoying the process. So I definitely think that's one side of it. And I think the second side is related to desire, and that we don't really know where life is taking us. We might have ideas, but I find life has a way, if we want to stay open, it's going to re-navigate us in where it wants us to go. And we might even build success in a certain direction. And it's like, that's great. But probably like 3 steps ago, you could have turned this way and that would have been the better fit. And sometimes we take those extra steps and it's like, all right, I actually needed to be over here.
Yeah.
And I feel the more range we have inside of ourselves as an identity, as a sense of who we are, the more open we can be to navigating that. And those changes can be anything. It can be like becoming a mother or a father or a wife or a husband. It can be opening a business. It can be going on your own and opening a second business. Like where life wants to invite us to go will probably stretch our sense of self, our identity. And the more capacity we can have to move with those waves without contracting, or contracting as less as possible, the more grace can meet us. That's one way of languaging it.
Yeah. And sometimes we feel like we do go down the wrong path or the wrong track, and then we re-navigate back. But what I've found is when I go down those detours, is what I call them, I always learn something that I need for my path. I get some key knowledge here and have a key experience here, and it helps me as I'm back on path and moving in the direction that I'm going. And the other thing that popped up for me as you were saying that, and I don't know what you believe about this, but I believe that as the soul deciding that we're going to have a human experience, that there are milestones that we code in. Yeah, that's probably how I want to say it, that we will experience those milestones on our life path that actually, regardless of the decisions that we make as a human, because we have free will, we have choice, those milestones are going to be met somehow. And that those milestones or experiences actually keep us on that true path, if you want to call it the true path. What's your experience been on experiencing those milestones?
Yeah, I like what you're saying here. I think there's certain things in my life that could not have not happened, if that makes sense. Like
Yeah.
for me, when I first learned to meditate, I was like, oh my God, why did no one tell me about this? Like it was a life-changing moment to the core of my being.
Yeah.
And it was just an intoxicated love with it. I was like, I just want to be with this practice and I want to keep doing this practice. And sometimes we come up with excuses like, oh, it's too far for me to come to this because blah, blah, blah. I was driving 2 hours to meditate for 1 hour because the guy that was holding down that practice, I was like, I just need to be here. There was no logic that was going to get in the way of that. But I also feel equally importantly is these milestones and also the words of people. And like I remember when I first started speaking, there was 2 or 3 people that were in positions of power that were like, do you realize what happens when you speak? And I was like, no, not really. They're like, you're really good at this. And I was like, oh, am I? They're like, yeah, you need to keep doing this and smile when you speak. It was like, if you smile on stage and you keep doing what you're doing, this is, you've really got a gift there.
Yeah.
And it was like those words kept echoing inside me from those moments. But I love the fact that it took them seeing something and choosing to communicate it that really anchored the importance of those milestones in my life.
Yeah.
Because sometimes just the milestone, it becomes like we can talk ourselves out of it. Thoughts can change. Should I really be doing this? But when you have these people whose opinion you value that have anchored in what they've seen and what's possible, it's like it drives your life with even more ferocity in.
And it kind of pulls you, doesn't it?
Yeah.
In that direction. Yeah.
Yeah, without a doubt. And this is for me also why, like I often say to people when I teach speaking, I'm like, I'm not teaching you, like, yes, you get the logical bits. Yes, I can teach you technique. But what you really get is the experience of opening yourself, which not many people teach when it comes to working with the stage. And as you're opening yourself and speaking from that place, that gets anchored in with a room of people.
Yeah.
And seeing you in more of your power, more of your strength, more of your purpose, which then becomes like a realized possibility for you. Like the parts that you didn't even know was inside you has now been shown and anchored into the world, and it becomes a stepping stone for you to take the next step from it.
Yeah, absolutely. And, as we journey through life, especially if we have that spiritual awareness, we know that there's steps. We know that we're taking steps, and I can't speak for everyone. I can speak for myself. I know when I've experienced a shift because I feel it physically, emotionally, mentally, spiritually. And I work with the 7 bodies, aurically, energetically, etherically. Like I feel it through all of the layers. And then I want to become stable in that new awareness. And so that's what my practice is to become stable in that new self-awareness. And then automatically something then expands me. And I look at it, and I don't think I've even got a rubber band here, but if we put a rubber band between my fingers and I pulled it and pulled it and pulled it and pulled it and pulled it, it's eventually going to snap. But if I put a rubber band between my fingers and I pull it out to there, and then I allow it to adjust and become stable, and then I pull it again, it actually won't break as easily as if I went like that. And so that's how that metaphor is how I have conducted my life. I pull the rubber band, gets uncomfortable, I get comfortable, and then I pull it again. And then I get comfortable. And so it's like I'm moving, I keep stretching my comfort zone, but not too fast that I snap and I come back. And it's that's kind of the vision that I have in my mind around growth.
Yeah, that's a really good metaphor for it. I like that.
Yeah. So I want to come back to that work that you did at Monash.
Yeah, sure.
So could you talk to me a little bit about that?
So half the work was looking at everything else that's been written in the field of embodied presence, especially as a pedagogical approach. Pedagogy is just a fancy word for the art and science of teaching. Speaking, teaching, facilitating, like all of this is really just different words for teaching.
Yeah.
So that was one element of it. The second element was me doing interviews with existing yoga students at the time. So yoga was anything I was teaching at the time regularly enough to be able to have a controlled environment.
Yeah.
With as few changes as possible. So I conducted the study in that kind of space, and I interviewed a handful of students about my approach, what makes a difference, that embodied presence approach, how they receive it, the effect it has on them, that kind of stuff. And in unison with that, I also did embodied self-reflection. So self-reflection can look like just journaling. When it's embodied, you utilize your body to get data as well.
Yeah.
And that was then photographed, analyzed by me, then cross-analyzed by another person, fairly in-depth process, months of work.
Hang on.
Yep.
Photographed. What do you mean?
So in response to certain questions, I would let my body give the answer. And my body would go into a posture or an expression or a movement, and then I would either get that photographed or videotaped.
Oh my goodness.
It was non-verbal responses to questions, which gives me more data than just verbal responses.
Yeah.
And if I was to give you the findings briefly,
yes, please do.
One of my favorite chapters in the thesis was called The Mother Wound, which is not a topic you hear come up often in these kind of papers, or definitely not as a chapter heading. And basically what I discovered is, in my state, and I would also say in the experience I've had in training hundreds, if not thousands of people with speaking, is when we say we're afraid of speaking, it's not actually speaking that we're afraid of. What's happening on a deeper level is we're taking our deepest fears, projecting that onto the room unconsciously, then reliving those fears. So in my case, as I did these deep levels of self-reflection, I was projecting my mother wound onto the room. So my mother doesn't love me. I want to be a good boy. I want to make her happy, blah, 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 blah. And feeling like I need to cater and respond to this invisible relationship, which has nothing to do with the people in front of me. But on some level, it seems to be that when we're on a stage, we go into compensating for the parts that have not been fully fulfilled or touched, which is why for me, speaking has also been the most healing, rewarding thing I've done. And I don't think of it as healing. Maybe I'll touch on that in a second, because when you read the opening, I was like, oh, I feel like I want to come back to this. But yeah, it was the capacity to see like, oh, wow, I'd been trying to impress and give these people a good experience and, have my students walk out feeling amazing, which I was quite good at.
Yeah.
As I went through the reflections, it was like, Miroslav, what if you just smiled? Like, what if that's all you did? Instead of giving people an amazing experience, you just opened the class and you smiled. And that was a real edge for me. Like, giving people an amazing experience, I was confident in. Just smiling and being myself was terrifying. And I still remember that moment where I was like, okay, next class, I'm going to go out there and I'm just going to smile. And I walked out the front and I sat down on my little meditation cushion at the front of the room. And I just kind of smiled awkwardly. And it was amazing, Julie, because everyone else smiled back at me. And I was like, oh my God, this is all it takes to be accepted. It's just to open myself up.
Wow. Wow. Like, what a moment. Did that moment change your life?
It gave me the possibility to see how simple it can be. But the habit of, what I call being a dancing monkey, doing all these things we think we need to belong and get by and blah, blah, blah. It's like, it's a deep habit.
Yeah.
And it's been a continual reminder of like, no, this is just one of those moments where I can smile. Like, I don't have to perform. I don't have to entertain. Me just being me is all that this moment needs.
So you smiled at them. They all smiled back. And then what happened?
I think we went into the class from there, but it was a radically deeper sense of connection in the whole room, because I chose to open myself and meet the room from there. It's like we started in a whole different baseline than, this is how we do tree pose, which was never my classes anyway, but you get what I mean.
I really like that. So with the smile, everybody smiled back. You actually changed the frequency in the room. And everyone was responding from that new frequency. Yeah.
Exactly.
That's a powerful, powerful message. And I hope that if our listeners take nothing else from this chat, that they take that. The power of the smile and not having to give anything to the people in our environment, but smile and be ourselves, and that will transform.
I would add one other little layer. I think the smiling is what it was for me. But in having worked with countless people now, it's like I found it's different for everyone. For some people, they're naturally very smiley and they walk around their whole life smiling. It's no big deal. And I found with them, it's like the same level of connection is not being created through the smile. It's like we have to look at where are the parts of you that you've hidden and maybe only reveal when you feel really safe.
That's amazing.
Yeah. And that's where I found like that's really at the heart of my work, is when we open these parts we've kept secret, that's where we create the most connection, because we're willing to actually be vulnerable and not just act vulnerable. And from that place, it's like we're speaking a whole different language.
And you know what? I don't know when I decided to change, but probably it was in 2001. Before that, I actually didn't speak very much. And if I even had an opinion, I would say, I don't even know who I am. I don't even know what my opinion is. I don't have an opinion. And if a charge would come up, I'd push it down. No one wants to hear what I have to say. That's what I would say to myself. And look, did I have evidence of that? Yes, I did. I did have evidence that people didn't want to hear what I have to say. And so by pushing that down, I actually rotted organs in my body, right? I had 4 thyroid diseases, and I rotted my tonsils. And then it went down further. I rotted my gallbladder, I rotted my womb, I rotted my ovaries, like all the way down through my body. I've lost all the parts that I could have lost and without not functioning. And so when I lost my voice in 2000 through surgery, I didn't have a voice for 10 months. And then the doctor said, well, you can't speak because your left vocal cord is only operating 5%. So you may never speak again. I went home from that doctor's appointment and I lay in bed and I said, you know what, God, if you give me back my voice, I promise I will share what I've learned on this incredible journey. And the doctor had said, well, you could try a speech pathologist. So I went to the speech pathologist and she said, yes, I think I can help you speak again, but you have to do the work. You have to do the work every day. And so I did. I practiced every day for an hour what she asked me to do. And I went away a couple of months later, still not speaking very well. And when I came back, I was speaking like this. And what I did when I went away was I meditated most of the day. So I was meditating and I did my exercises and I healed whatever it was. But I made that promise that I would share what I had learned. And the other thing was that I would share it in divine timing, not in my timing. And that was a really key thing for me to learn, because I'd go, oh, well, I'm good now. I'm ready to teach. And then I'd get the nightmares for 8, 9, 10 nights in a row. And then I'd go, all right, I'm not ready yet. And then they'd stop. And then another couple of years would go. In the end, I stopped saying I'm ready. And I said, when you think I'm ready, then I will do it. And that's now. That's why we have this podcast. That's why I have my institute, because it was in divine timing, not my timing. And so I had to learn the difference. And that was quite the journey of learning divine order rather than my order. So have you ever had that experience? Oh, you're muted.
Sorry, I didn't realize that happened. Yeah, I feel like my whole life has been a product of that. I first had a psychic medium from stage. I was just walking through a festival, and this psychic medium was on stage, and he goes, "You're going to have a massive speaking career all over the world, but especially the States. I keep seeing the Star Spangled Banner behind you. You just have to take care of what's happening in here." I was pointing to, I was pretty depressed at the time. And I laugh now. That was over 10 years ago.
Wow.
He never told me it was going to take 10 years. It happened before 10 years, and it's still happening. I'm like, what he was seeing, only recently I had a mentor come up to me and go, I think your next move is to take this to the States. And I'm like, I know. I've known this for a long time, but it was just this sense of it wasn't going to happen when I wanted to happen. Like, it's listening to life's rhythms and moving with those rhythms,
Exactly. Yeah. So I think I sidetracked you from
there's the thing I
your
wanted
study.
to come back to.
Yeah, come back to
there was a study, but I feel to take it here first, and if you want, we can go back to the study after that. I think there's an importance here in the way we relate to our challenges and our virtues. And it can be quite easy to get stuck in the realm of, this is my trauma, this is the healing I need to do, et cetera, et cetera. It becomes a bit like an endless hamster wheel. And for some people, at some time, for an X amount of time, that's exactly where they need to be. It's like, we don't want to discount that. Things do need to get healed, traumas do need to get resolved. And there's also a point when it's like, okay, we're just spinning our wheels here now. because we're afraid of actually doing the thing.
Yeah.
It's like, and I've seen this in my own journey, and I see it with my clients as well. It's like, how many modalities do you want to collect before you go out and start your business? Because you only need one.
Yeah.
Like everything else is potentially a fear system disguised in very nice, colorful language that's stopping you from actually doing the life and taking the steps you need to take, which will give you momentous growth. Not like 2% healing. This is like 200% healing if you actually start the business. And I know that's a trap that I've been in, like I mentioned, and I see for other people as well. And recently I've also been thinking, it's like, the trauma conversation has been useful. We haven't had language for this, a decade ago.
Yeah.
And even if we did, no one was talking about it.
Exactly.
It's good that now it's become a part of the regular vocabulary. We're talking about corporate trauma and useful conversations that need to be had. And a part of me can't help but think, what's the next installment of this? Like, when this cycle of the conversation finishes and the next one starts, what does that look like?
Yeah.
And for me, the way I envision that and the way I see that is we start looking at perhaps that, trauma, and depending on where we're using, we're a big T or a small t, but when these things happen, parts of us get suppressed. And at some points, those parts are going to need expression again.
Yeah.
And for them to first be expressed, it needs to happen in a place where they're also received. If I'm expressing myself and I'm yelling at you, but you're not receiving it, that's not going to shift the suppressed pattern. So it needs this sense of being received and welcomed, and the system that's doing the expressing to feel a sense of safety before it can grow on to the next level. And for me, there is a profound sense of creativity when we're talking about that place.
Yeah.
And I see this with my clients a lot. It's like, wow, they're just expressing parts of themselves for the first time, and we get to witness this. And the miracle of that, it's like we're on the bleeding edge with life as life is pouring through this person in a new way. It's not the repetitive thing they're always saying to themselves. It's like we're so deeply with them because they're showing us a real, true, authentic part of themselves.
And do you know what Tash and I call that is that we are facilitating co-creation with our client. That it's a co-creation because they feel safe, they have a guide, but they're actually bringing that through themselves. And so they have that sense of ownership of what is happening.
And for me, even as you say that, that's a whole different paradigm we're living inside of, as opposed to how do we heal and how do we fix our traumas. I can't even say the words you just did, but there's this sense of like profound creativity, profound expression, profound connection that happens when we live from that place. And essentially the work being done is very similar, if not the same. Like, yes, there's going to be circumstantial differences. I can't speak generally for everything and everyone, but the internal chemical process of stepping into what you just described is like a different expression of the same thing.
Yeah.
And
I can't repeat what I just said.
Luckily you recorded it.
Luckily. But it's an absolute honor to be the witness of someone's transformation that is happening within them. And I guess that's what my 40 years of working in the metaphysical realm and bringing my experiences into the physical realm and helping people have those experiences for themselves that can be anchored in a somatic experience that their body actually remembers what they've experienced, and they can anchor that in and take that forward. And as you're talking about helping people with the fear of public speaking, I get this sense that you give them an experience that is somatic in a way that opens a door for them that doesn't quite shut again, that they can just walk through, and they have the the memory
Yeah.
of that freedom. And I know, like, I've been doing medical intuitive readings for paid medical intuitive readings for 30 years. And I was doing it 10 years before that with anyone who would let me. And I didn't charge for that. And it's only like the last few years that I didn't feel sick before I did my session, didn't do the scan. And every time I'll go, what if I don't get anything? What if I'm wrong? What if they don't like me? What if, like, all those what ifs? And what I would do is it was almost like that was on that side. And then over here, it would go, have you ever been wrong? Sometimes. What did you do? I gave them their money back. How did they receive that? They were grateful. And what happens if you are 90% right? What do you do? And I go, oh, well, I just say, is there anything that I've missed? And they tell me. And then I go, I asked all those affirming questions to all my fear questions. And that's how I repatterned or what's the word? I've lost my words.
I get what you mean.
Reframe. I would reframe myself.
Mm.
And you know what got me through? When I heard that Adele would vomit before she went out on stage and sang so incredibly, and then sometimes she would go off stage and vomit. Because of her fear, I'd go, if Adele can do it, you can do it. So just do it and see what happens. And that's what got me through. So much so now that I don't actually feel that fear. I don't experience the contraction when I go to do my work, because I have so much evidence that what I do is helpful, that it is going to help that person. And I have the language, to communicate and pre-frame people to how I work. I stopped trying to fit into their idea of who I was and felt comfortable to share who I am. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it's beautiful.
And that's where the shift came for me.
Yeah, I like it.
And for that shift to happen, I had to practice, like I had to do it. I couldn't just imagine it. I had to physically do the act to build the neural pathway that I could be me and not try and fit into the ideal that somebody wanted me to be. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
And I think that is part of, the growth, like whatever the fear and the nausea and whatever else was there, it's like, this is the way that, your soul or your system on some level chose to dissolve that stuff by doing this work.
Yeah. Yeah.
By you continually leaning into it, it's like it's being, exercised out of you. It's like you can just be more present with this now.
Yeah. As you said, exercised, I got burned out of, like, I could see the smoke coming up. So yeah.
Yeah, I think this is something we forget in the whole spiritual journey, that sometimes karma has to be burnt. It's not you can't heal all your karma. Like, some of it you actually have to burn through. And I remember one of my teachers saying, if your karma is to make a lot of money, you have to make a lot of money. Like, that's not going to go away. You can just pack it in your life, bring it back in another lifetime.
Yeah.
And I think there's a sense of, I don't know, remembering the play of life when we lean into that, like desire and all of these things happening. It's like we don't get to hang on to any of it. I don't even want to say enjoy it, because some of it isn't enjoyable. Like pain is a part of life if you want to dance with desire and, relationships and everything else. But can we lean in and feel it fully and make the most of it? And to quote Thoreau, suck the marrow out of life.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Because I think that's basically our two choices. We can lean away from it and go into more of a renunciate style of life, or we can really lean in and just be available to feel everything that life offers us.
Oh my gosh, Miroslav, I wanted to be a renunciate so bad. So bad. I can't even tell you. I wanted to renounce all of the material world. And that wasn't to be my path. But what happened was, this is what I learned in that very intense 3 years of my life: that which you avoid chases you. That which you seek is forever elusive. And so avoiding or seeking, they didn't work for me. And so what I found was, if I could be present and in the middle, then that's when I found flow.
This is really good. I think the way you just languaged that with your hands as well while you were speaking was beautiful. So if anyone that's just listening to the audio, be sure you catch the video back on that little segment as well.
Yeah. And, one of my teachers, he actually really confronted me about my psychic development. And I wouldn't say that he ridiculed it, but he confronted me and really challenged me about it. And so in my wisdom at that time, I started avoiding it. Anything that had anything to do with my intuition or psychic, I started avoiding it. And guess what happened? The phenomenon got bigger and more magnified and more frequent the more I avoided it. The more I said I didn't want that, the more experiences I had. And that's how I was able to just let the avoidance go and come back to center, and all of that fell away. And I was so relieved. And then when it fell away, I started to seek it because it didn't feel like me. And that's when it became the elusive. And so then I let it go, and then I came back to center. And I just felt like when I come back to center, I can breathe. And I don't mean just physically breathe. I can actually like breathe at that soul level. I feel in balance. I feel on even keel, and that I can, and then I feel expanded when I find and that comes back to feeling centered. That's the center. Yeah,
completely. It's a really nice transmission. Even as you're sharing it, like I'm feeling the response inside my body of coming more deeply into center as well.
Yeah. You know what? I think we could chat all day, but we should probably wrap up. So what last words of wisdom do you want to share today?
I think I'm going to piggyback off what you just said. So at one point I thought I was going to be a renunciate. I didn't really think that, but I had to kick the ball, so to speak. And I ended up in India. I went to an ashram. There was a point in my life where my dad even said to me, you can be happy without living in an ashram and just meditating your whole life. And even back then I was like, I know. I was like, you should probably be more concerned about my speaking career than, what I might say on stage than whether I'm going to be a renunciate. Because there's a part of me that's like, I don't even get to choose this. I can see the direction life wants to take me.
Yeah.
And I ended up in India. And I was in this ashram. And it was mostly Indian people, apart from this one Swiss lady who, she was in her years. She had long white hair and she always wore like white dresses. She kind of looked like this white witch just floating around, in a space where it was otherwise all people just speaking Indian, speaking Marathi. And on the first or second day, she came up to me and she's like, oh, we should have a chat, come over to my place. We'll have a chai. And I went over and she was like, so what are you doing here? It's like, what do you mean? She's like, you don't belong here. You belong out in the world.
Yeah.
And I laughed. It was like she read my soul in that moment. And I was like, I know. I'm like, I know that as well. I just have to burn through any ideas that this is where I'm supposed to be. I kind of have to prove it to myself that this isn't where I need to be in this lifetime. And I was in ashram, I don't know, a month and a half. And it was pretty intense. It was just meditation. No say that you're meditating like, 10, 12 intense people, even up to 15 hours a day or something.
Yeah.
And those were the most challenging meditations I'd ever had. It's like it took all of my willpower to stay in the practice, especially for that long. And when the call came back, like I got called because family events happened back home in Australia to bring me back, everything inside me came online. And I was like, this is definitely where I need to go. Like the path I'm walking in this lifetime is in the world.
Yeah. Yep. And I came to that conclusion as well. And during those 3 years, I read Irina Tweedy's book, Daughter of Fire. Have you read that book?
No, I haven't.
It probably illustrates, it's a book about this thick, about 2 inches thick, and it illustrates a Western woman's journey through an ashram in India and the whole up and down of the day-to-day of it. And I read that book and it kind of informed my reality for that time, and it was challenging. And so I never went to India, but I feel like I went based on what I did in my world at that time. But
well, I mean, I feel it's relevant to kind of remember the bigger scope in things. It's like whether you believe in karma or not, it's very likely that many of us have lived multiple lifetimes. I don't even hold that as a belief or a faith. I would just say I've had experiences that don't make sense in this lifetime.
Yeah.
And I remember there was an interview, I think it was with the Dalai Lama, and they were asking him, like, how do you explain all this suffering? Some people like Beethoven become master pianists at the age of 14 or something. I'm very much paraphrasing here. And other people don't create much of anything in their life. And he was like, well, you're assuming that Beethoven lived only one lifetime.
Yeah.
And how many lifetimes he devoted to that craft, to music, before he could come back and nail it the way he did.
Yeah.
And for me, there's been a very real sense of that. Like when I went to India, I was like, a part of me knows this place like home, undeniably.
Yeah.
And I also know it's not my place in this lifetime. Like there is so much, I can feel tears inside me. There is so much gift and richness and wisdom that place has offered to me and my soul. And also the knowing that it's a very different life the soul is choosing to walk in this lifetime. And can I just be humble and keep listening to the path that's being forged through me? And for us, a lot of us are walking pathways that don't have a prescribed
map.
Exactly. It's very much the internal listening is just as strong as what's happening around us.
Yeah, we have to listen to our internal GPS and take the steps that we're feeling guided from the internal guidance system.
Yeah. And I think it's beautiful that we've had, like, I just think of Christ, the embodiment and example that he was to the rest of us, especially in the West. Like that's a spiritual path through suffering, through the material world, saying yes to life and not having a predefined path, like just being willing to listen to something much deeper inside of us. And I guess that's not Christianity in the way we relate to it in today, and to certain forms it may be, but for me, like it's a weird thing to express when speaking about Christ, but the sword in the ground or the cross in the ground that he placed for like honoring that internal voice that he chose to lead in his lifetime, like that's for me is the reason why it's still echoing thousands of years later.
Yeah, I would agree with you there.
And the fact that he broke out of any sense of organized religion to follow that is like, it just like puts the whole thing on a megaphone. It's like, oh my God, the sheer audacity and the gift it's given to everyone else that's come after him. And I'm sure he wasn't the first one to follow that either, but in modern times, it's the first example that springs to mind. Anyway, I do feel, yes, we could keep talking forever. Is it okay if I tell people about my book and how to connect with people?
Absolutely, please do.
So if you have enjoyed any of this and you want to explore some more of my stories, Give Them Goosebumps is a guide for teaching, speaking, and facilitating in any scope you're doing it, like whether you're going corporate, whether you're just running small workshops, yoga teachings. It's a good deal of my expertise. Both half the book is my journey and my path, so you get some really cool stories, and then the second half is the really practical side of what to know to further deepen the way you're working with groups. So that's one element. And the second one is, if you enjoyed this and you want to connect, just find me on social media, Miroslav Petrovic or Miroslav Bardovic, Bardovic or Petrovic, just in the moment of transition. And just like send me a message and say that you listen to me on Julie's podcast, just so I have context, and it opens up the conversation. So I appreciate
absolutely
connections too.
And I can't wait to read your book, and I'm sure I will have goosebumps all the way through.
I'm glad. It's also on Audible and Spotify. So for any of you who don't like reading, you can just listen to it.
Fantastic. That's awesome. So we'll put all the links in the description on YouTube, Spotify, Apple. We're on many platforms, so we'll have all those details there as well.
Amazing.
So, Miroslav, thank you so much. Thank you. This has been a great chat, and we might have another chat in the future. It's been really great having you here, and I look forward to staying connected.
Yeah, likewise. Thank you so much, Julie. I appreciate it as well.
Thank you.